So the Broncos fired Hackett on Monday morning, and now the interim head coach will be Jerry Rosburg, who was the special analyst to help out Nathaniel Hackett with the in-game decisions and all that stuff. But before we get into what was said at the press conference by the Denver ownership group and general manager George Payton, do you think that this was the time to fire Hackett? Like, was there no other option here for the Broncos, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, look, they laid a complete egg. We talked about it on national television. They laid that egg. And once you lay an egg like that on national TV and the team played with no energy, no intensity, you felt like it had to happen. I thought it was after the Carolina game. I said on the pod, and that was, week 12 of the season? Yep. I thought they played with no energy. They were disconnected, and then the next week they went back to Baltimore and they played a closer game, but they still, but to me, the meltdown on defense last week, making Baker Mayfield look like the second coming of Dan Marino, not even throwing incomplete passes. I think it showed the organization that the team has tuned him out. And once the team has completely tuned you out and you're making a change, you're better off spending the next 2 weeks collecting data than you are trying to pretend that you're all in, And so, you put this guy, I thought they were smart. I thought the defensive coordinator was smart to not take the job because, there's no win in that. Let him interview for it. Let him run his defense. Let him do what he wants to do. I think he was smart not to. Now, remember, most of the staff is all controlled by one agent, Richmond Flowers, the former player. He's got all these coaches on the staff. So, it's a lot of maneuvering going on in there. And they fired two coaches too. They fired the special teams coach and the offensive line coach. Two of the most critical hires Hackett can make is the line coach and the special teams coach, and they fired both of them before the end of the year.
It's been a disaster of a situation for the Broncos, hiring Nathaniel Hackett, and then you trade for Russell Wilson. You give all those picks to Seattle. Then you give the big extension to Russell Wilson, and he's played like a bottom three quarterback all season long. I mean, about as bad of an offseason and a regular season as you can have for one team. But you were really interested in what the CEO and the owner of the Denver Broncos had to say, Greg Penner. Here's what he said when he was asked about what type of coach he's looking for to replace Nathaniel Hackett.
I've worked with a lot of great CEOs, and it starts with really strong leadership. I think that's going to be the most critical factor here in a head coach. Obviously, the X and O's are important, but we need a strong leader for this organization that's focused on winning. That starts with culture. It's instilling a sense of accountability, discipline, and we need an identity on offense. But at the starting point, it's got to be about culture and leadership, and those characteristics are what we'll be focused on the most.
Michael, what do you think of that?
I love it. I mean, it's the first time I've ever heard an owner even talk about it. He talked about alignment. He talked about accountability. He talked about leadership. He didn't talk about whose offense can we hire. He didn't talk about let's hire Nathaniel Hackett because he might be able to get us Aaron Rodgers. He didn't talk about subcontracting. He talked about hiring a leader. Now, to me, the challenge he has is who's he going to hire? How many of those guys fit that qualification? Mm-hmm. How many guys are true leaders? How many guys have been trained to become a true leader, a true CEO of a company? How many guys think on a global level, on a macro level, to rebuild this franchise? They also said that George Payton's not going to be running everything, that Payton's going to report to him, and the head coach is going to kind of be the CEO, which I think is really smart. But he's got to find the right guy. He's almost going to have to look in college because there's very few guys in the NFL that could meet that criteria that he just set forward because they're not used to running programs, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's used to running a program. You could say, well, hire a guy who's been a former head coach. Well, he's not used to running that program. He's, the guys who got Pat Shermer, he's been a head coach twice, but he's been really an offensive coordinator that they made a head coach. So that doesn't fit the bill. And it's going to be interesting how the agents get to Penner to kind of position their guy as a CEO because all these guys that are going to come in for an interview are going to come in with their profile. They're going to say, well, here's what I'm going to run on offense, and here's the list of guys I'm going to hire to fill in the blanks on the staff. Mm-hmm. Whereas if the true CEO walks in and says, okay, here's my vision. Here's the way I want this to team. Here's the way the team's going to look. Here's what we're going to be on offense. Here's how we're going to be accountable. Here's how we're going to handle the team. And I'm going to find coaches that fit this profile, and I'm going to coach the coaches. How many people you think on planet Earth can do that?
Not a whole lot. The ones that can already have jobs.
Typically. So you got to have to find a young college coach that you feel like you can nurture and bring in. And then you got to have somebody help coach the coaches. Because what he's saying right there is the problem with that, Nathaniel, was, everything became scheme-oriented. Well, it's got to be plays. And then you got to find somebody who's going to come in who's tough, who's going to walk into Russell and say, Russell, I need to have a meeting with you. Because what Shannon Sharp said is true. Russell has always positioned himself as an entitled player. That's one of the things that killed him in Seattle with his teammates. That's why all those teammates were there rooting against him, because he put himself above the team. He did the same thing in Denver. He's got 12 bathrooms in a house. Of all this stuff that he's promoting, right? I love it. People say he's got 12 bathrooms. He has 12 touchdown passes. So if he gets another touchdown pass, he's got to build another bathroom in the house. Like, I get it. Like, you can't have 5 parking spots at the stadium. Like, see, to me, that's Peyton's problem. He allowed that to happen. Like, when you sign a player and you make a trade like that, you got to de-recruit him. You got to say, hey, you got to become humble, and you got to get with your teammates. They're not going to respect you if you're going to act entitled. They're really not going to respect you if you act entitled and you don't play good. They'll put up with you if you act entitled and you're great. They did that in Seattle. But once you start to decline, they ain't going to put up with you. And that's pretty clear. So the next guy that walks into Denver's got to walk into Russ's office in the facility and say, Russ, we're going to take this office from you, and those 5 parking spots that you got at the stadium, you can forget about that too. Here's how this shit's going to go. Here's how we're going to do this. You're a player. You play. You got a lot of money coming to you. You get no benefits. Until you start playing, everybody's going to get treated the same. And when you play shitty, we're going to tell everybody you play shitty.
And a lot of people have made the comment that, hey, this is such a bad job because of Russell Wilson's contract, because of the lack of the draft picks, because that's what they had to use to get Russell Wilson. But I kind of push back on that, because there's only 32 of these jobs, so it can't be a bad job. Like you eventually got to coach somebody if you want to become a head coach. Who do you think that they could target? I mean, Sean Payton's a name that's been floated around. There's no real buzz about whether Sean Payton's interested in Denver, but he's one of those guys that could be a CEO and has done it, has won a Super Bowl, has won a lot of games as a head coach. Do you think that this job could attract someone of that stature, or do they have to go, like you said, the college route, or somebody that's a little lesser known in the NFL ranks?
I think you got to find somebody that meets the criteria, right? At least one thing I would say which makes this job attractive is the owner gets it. See, what makes jobs great in the NFL has nothing to do with who's on the roster. It has everything to do with the owner. I think one of the reasons why, the owners make the difference. This guy, what he just declared is what he's looking for, will make a difference. Because if you come in and show him that you have command, you're holding people accountable, you run a disciplined program, he's not expecting you to win the Super Bowl in year one. What you got to find is, who's the young Bill Parcells out there? Because remember, when George Young hires Bill Parcells, he's the defense coordinator, he's the linebacker coach at the Giants, right? He'd been a head coach once in his life at the Air Force Academy, and that didn't work out, right? And so, how do you find that guy? You got to find somebody who's been trained how to do that. You got to find somebody who understands, hey, I'm gonna run. I'm not running the offense. I'm not running the defense. I'm running the team. And I'm going to hire somebody specifically to run an offense that I feel like fits our skill set. That's what it's going to take. Is that Dan Quinn? Would that be Dan Quinn? Well, Dan Quinn's always turned the offense over to somebody. So now Dan Quinn's got to position himself a little differently. Like I'm going to come in, I'm going to hold people. Dan's a happy guy. He does. It's that Pete Carroll thing.
Yeah.
But Dan the second time might be different. So you got to, what's he going to be like? Is he going to hold him accountable? I mean, George Payton believed that he needed somebody to run it off. He's from that old this. What Penner's saying is completely the opposite of how people hire in the NFL.
Yep.
And so it's going to be for me, I know Don Martindale. I've had more than 1,000 conversations with Martindale. Is a Bill. He's not Rex Ryan. He's Bill Parcells. That's who he is. He sees the game from a different level. And so for me, because he was around Al, he got that ingrained into his system to see the game from a bigger level. But the problem is we're losing all these people that saw the game from a bigger level. We've done nothing to train them. And so we end up with these, as I keep saying, we end up with subcontractors. We don't have it. We never end up with a chief figure-out officer at the head coaching position. So, but I'm sure they're out there. You just got to dig. You got to figure it out. Is D'Amico Ryans that guy? Okay, I don't know. I know he could run a defense, but can he lead an organization? Right? I mean, that's the difference. You got to be able to figure out. It's like, can he lead the organization? And I just read a quote this morning. I was reading a book, and it was kind of the problem with the NFL is they try to pair innovation and ingenuity together, right? And so, how does that work? We keep looking for innovation. We keep looking for that one guy who runs an offense who's going to come in here and run an offense. Instead of looking for the guy who is going to lead the team and is going to set the pillars of success within the framework of the team. This is who we are. If I go interview with Greg Penner, I would walk in and say, Greg, here's who we're going to be on offense. We're going to be physical. We're going to control the middle of the field. We're going to play in bad weather. We're going to run the football. We're going to make explosive plays down the field, whatever. And we're basically going to be this and go from there.
I think it's perfect that you laid it out that way with some of these guys who are the scheme guys. It's almost like you're too close to the trees that you miss the whole forest type of thing. You don't see the 22,000-foot view, and that's what makes a really good head coach. And it's what we saw with Brian Daboll with the New York Giants. Everybody was raving about his play calling in Buffalo, and he says, you know what? I'm not calling the plays here because I'm the head coach. I'm going to bring in somebody to call the offense that I want run, and then we're going to also bring in a defensive coach, and we're going to try to go about it that way. And the Giants have had a lot of success in year one under Brian Daboll. Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, and for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.